Dakota Territory, 1879. The wind was dry as bone and hotter than a cook stove, and Rachel Ellery had not felt the weight of her own body in days, only the weight of her baby girl, swaddled tight and tucked against her chest. She walked. Boots cracked open brittle earth. Her dress clung to her thighs with sweat, and her arms ached from holding little Sadie so close. 40 miles behind her lay the scorched remains of a wagon, a dead mule, and a man she had once called husband. His name was never worth repeating, not after he'd left her and the baby with no water and taken the rifle for himself. He had said he was off to find help. That was 6 days ago. Rachel had not cried. Not when the mule collapsed. Not when the sun peeled her skin. Not when her lips cracked and bled. Not even when the baby stopped crying and started sleeping too long. She just walked. The Badlands cut the sky in jagged teeth. Wind clawed at her skirts. Buzzards circled. "Shoo, little one," she whispered into Sadie's curls. "We are going to keep moving. Mama's got you." She had wrapped Sadie in her only spare shawl, the soft blue one her mother had knit before she passed. It was now sun-bleached and stiff with dust. Rachel's own dress, once a hopeful green, was ripped and dull. Her lips were split. Her hands shook. But she kept walking. The sun was past its peak when she saw the rider. He came from the west, his horse a lean-legged bay, his hat pulled low against the heat. He moved with purpose but not rush, like a man who had seen every sort of trouble and was not surprised to see it again. Rachel stopped walking. Her knees almost gave. She held on tighter to Sadie. The rider pulled up not 10 feet from her. He looked down, then dismounted slow. "You lost?" he asked, voice low but clear. Rachel stared at him. Dust coated her lashes. "No, I know where I am. I just do not want to die here." The man looked at the baby, then back at her. "You out here alone?" She nodded. "My husband left us 6 days ago." The man's jaw tightened. He stepped forward, leading his horse. "What's her name?" "Sadie." Rachel's voice broke on it. She shook her head, swallowed. "Sadie Ellery." "I am Rachel." He crouched near her, not close enough to spook her, just enough to meet her eyes. "I am Silas Whitlow. You need water?" She nodded once. He was already unhooking his canteen. "I will take a sip," she said. "She needs it more." He passed it over. Rachel wet her fingers and touched them to Sadie's lips first. The baby stirred, mouth seeking. Rachel tilted the canteen carefully, letting a few drops fall. Sadie sucked greedily. Rachel's eyes filled, but still she did not cry. Silas watched, quiet. "There is a ranch 5 miles east. My brother's. We can get you there. You and the little one." Rachel looked out across the cracked land. "I cannot ride," she said. "I am too sore, and she cannot bump too much." Silas nodded once. "Then I walk beside you." She blinked. "You do not have to." "I do," he said, tying his horse's reins and falling into step beside her. They walked in silence, just boots crunching over rock and grit. Rachel's steps were slower now. Silas matched them. Every so often he glanced at Sadie, made sure she was breathing steady. The sun dipped lower. "You have people?" Silas asked. "No," Rachel said. "My family died in Kansas from the fever. His family never liked me." Silas grunted. "Then we will get you somewhere safe." "Why are you helping me?" she asked, voice dry. He looked at her. "Because no one else did." They reached a patch of shade under a jagged bluff and rested there. Rachel sat, cradling Sadie, and Silas handed her a strip of jerky. She chewed slowly. The baby stirred, fussed, then fell back asleep. "She okay?" he asked. Rachel nodded. "She is tough." She did not cry once when the mule went down. Silas sat near, arms on his knees. "You are tougher." She gave a tired laugh. "I do not feel it. I have seen strong," he said. "This is it." They said little else as the sky turned orange. When they started walking again, it was with shorter steps, but steadier. The wind cooled. 2 miles from the ranch, Rachel stumbled. Silas caught her elbow. "You all right?" "I just need a minute." She lowered herself to the ground, shielding Sadie from the wind. Her whole body trembled with the effort of keeping upright. Silas knelt beside her. "I can carry her," he offered. Rachel shook her head. "She needs me." "I did not mean instead of you," he said. "I meant both of you." She looked up. His eyes were steady. "Let me carry you the rest of the way." "No," she whispered. "I have to finish it." He nodded once. "Then I will walk beside you." She rose again. He kept his hand near her elbow, not touching unless she wavered. Step by step, they walked through the last stretch of the Badlands, the dirt turning softer underfoot, the hills gentler. By the time the lantern light from the ranch flickered into view, Rachel was weeping silently. Not from pain, but from relief. Silas opened the gate with one hand and said, "Come on, Miss Ellery. You are home now." And in that moment, she believed him. He led her to the porch, where his brother's wife opened the door wide. Warm smells, clean water, and soft voices filled the air. Rachel sat on the steps, clutching Sadie, and Silas crouched beside her. "I will get you food, clean sheets, a place to rest," he said. Rachel looked at him. "Will you stay?" He blinked. "If you ask me to." "I am asking." His face softened. "Then I will." She reached out suddenly, fingers brushing his. "Thank you." He did not answer. He just held her hand, careful and sure, and stayed beside her as night fell. By morning, Rachel's hands had stopped shaking. She sat on the edge of a straw-stuffed mattress in a quiet back room, her shoulders wrapped in a faded wool blanket. The walls were rough pine. A yellow bowl of water waited on the washstand. Through the narrow window, a line of cottonwood swayed, their leaves catching the rising sun like coins in a shallow stream. Sadie slept beside her, curled into the crook of a folded quilt, her breath soft and steady. Rachel had bathed her the night before, wiping away dust and salt with trembling fingers. The little girl's skin was smooth now, cheeks rosy with rest. Rachel brushed a hand over the baby's hair, then stood for the first time without pain singing in her legs. She found Silas behind the house, splitting kindling with a steady rhythm. His shirt sleeves were rolled to the elbow, and the morning light showed the crisscross of old scars along his forearms. He didn't stop when she stepped into view, just paused long enough to nod, then brought the hatchet down again. "I should be helping," she said, voice still hoarse from silence. He didn't look at her right away, just set the last piece aside and leaned on the stump. "You did more walking than most men could stand. That buys you rest." Rachel folded her arms. "Resting makes me feel useless. I wouldn't call keeping a child alive through that country useless." He wiped his hands on his trousers and finally met her gaze. "But if you need something to do, there's a basket of beans on the porch. My sister-in-law was hoping someone else might take a turn." Rachel nodded. "I'll see to them." They walked toward the porch together, their pace slow, unhurried. A rooster called in the distance. Somewhere nearby, a cow lowed. Rachel sat on the top step without asking, drawing the basket into her lap. The beans were thick-skinned and dusty green, needing stringing and snapping. Her hands moved automatically, like she'd done it 100 times before. Silas sat on the step below her, elbows on his knees. "You always from Kansas?" She nodded. "Born near Emporia. My father had a dairy. We lost most of the herd when the drought came through in '71. After that, he took to fixing wagons." "You miss it?" "Only the sound of rain on the roof before dawn. And the way the air smelled when he came in from the barn." She snapped a bean in half, the pop of it sharp. "What about you?" "Grew up near Yankton. My mother was Lakota. My father ran freight along the river." Rachel paused, surprised. "You're half Lakota?" He nodded. "Didn't know that was going to be a problem." "It's not," she said too fast. Then slower. "I just didn't expect it." He gave a short breath of something close to a laugh. "Most don't." They worked in silence for a time. Every now and then, Rachel dropped a handful of snapped beans into the bowl beside her. The rhythm settled her. The quiet, too. Finally, she asked, "You live here with your brother?" "For now. I come and go. Trail work, mostly. Droving in season. Hunting when it's lean." She glanced sideways. "So you don't stay long anywhere?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "Used to think that was safer." He looked up at her. "But lately I've been thinking maybe staying put don't mean giving up something. Maybe it means building something." Rachel's hands stilled. "I wouldn't know how to start again." "Not really. You already did," he said. You kept walking. The screen door creaked open behind them. Silas's sister-in-law, Ruth, stepped out with a folded cloth in her arms. "The baby's hungry," she said, offering it to Rachel. "And I thought these might help." Rachel stood, accepting the cloth. Inside was a bundle of clean linen, a small bottle, and a spoon carved from bone. She held it close, throat tight. "Thank you," she whispered. Ruth smiled gently and went back inside. Rachel turned to go, But Silas spoke low behind her. You could stay here. For a while. Until you know where you want to be. Rachel looked over her shoulder. Do you want that? He stood slowly. I do. She held his gaze for a beat. Then she nodded once and went inside. That evening, she fed Sadie by the window while the sky turned lavender. Down in the yard, Silas was fixing the chicken coop, hammering new slats into place. Rachel watched him without meaning to. The way he moved, measured, and patient eased something tight inside her. When she laid Sadie down for the night, the baby curled into her side without protest. Rachel ran her fingers through the curls at her temple and whispered a promise she hadn't dared speak before. Then she stepped out into the cooling air, the porch boards warm beneath her bare feet. Silas was just returning from the yard, hammer tucked under his arm. He stopped when he saw her. I put her down, Rachel said. She's sleeping easy. That's good. They stood in silence, the sounds of evening settling around them, crickets starting up in the tall grass, a windmill creaking faintly in the distance. Rachel turned to him. I don't think I can go back to who I was before. His voice was quiet. Maybe you don't have to. Maybe you just go forward. She swallowed. With who? Silas stepped closer. With someone who walks beside you. Every step. This time, when she reached for his hand, he didn't just hold it. He brought it to his chest, pressed it there like a vow. And Rachel, for the first time in a long time, let her shoulders fall and her breath deepen, not from weariness, but from a kind of peace she hadn't known she still had room for. The autumn wind tasted of sage and grit. It pushed low across the prairie, stirring dust in the dry grass behind the Whitlow place. Rachel leaned against the corral fence, her arms folded over a length of sun-warmed wood. Sadie nestled against her chest in a sling Ruth had sewn from an old feed sack. The baby's small thumb was tucked into her mouth, her lashes casting faint shadows on her cheeks. Silas was in the field, setting new posts along the south line. Rachel watched the way his shoulders moved under his shirt, the easy rhythm of his steps. He paused once to rub the back of his neck, then reached for the post-hole digger again. You've got a look on you, Ruth said, stepping up beside her with a pail of eggs. Same one I had after my second week courting John. Rachel didn't answer right away. She adjusted the sling, brushing a hand over Sadie's back. I'm not sure what kind of life's ahead of me. I don't know what I can offer. Ruth set the pail down and leaned her hip against the fence. Seems to me you already offered the kind of grit most folks never find. That baby's got a mother who didn't lay down when everything told her to. That counts for more than a dowry or a tidy past. Rachel glanced toward the field. He doesn't ask anything of me. Maybe he's waiting for you to want to give something on your own. The two women stood quietly, the rustling wind settling between them. A grasshopper leapt from the fence rail, vanishing into the brush. Later, when the sun was heavy and gold behind the cottonwoods, Rachel found Silas at the side shed, oiling the plow. His shirt was half-buttoned, streaked with dirt, and his hands bore the black sheen of grease. She stepped into the doorway, Sadie still dozing in the sling. He looked up. Everything all right? Rachel hesitated. I'd like to learn the work. More than just snapping beans or sweeping floors. I want to know what keeps a place like this standing. Silas set the cloth down, wiped his hands on his trousers. All right. Don't say it to humor me. I'm not. He picked up a smaller wrench and nodded toward the plow's wheel. This cotter pin slips loose sometimes. Needs watching. I'll show you how to set it proper. She stepped closer, watched as his fingers moved slow and deliberate. When he handed her the tool, their hands brushed. He didn't move away. Rachel crouched beside the wheel. Tell me what to do. He knelt beside her. You'll want to hold it steady here. Then twist it through this gap. She worked the pin into place, her brow furrowed. It stuck, then gave. Silas nodded once. There. Rachel sat back, brushing her hands on her skirt. That wasn't as hard as I thought. Most things aren't. Once you've got someone showing you where to start. She watched him for a moment. Do you want someone with you? Here. For more than a season? Silas didn't smile. He looked at her like he was measuring the weight of her words. I want a life that holds steady. One that don't break apart when the wind changes. I want someone who's already proven they can stand through the worst of it. Rachel's voice was quiet. Even with what I carry. Especially with what you carry. She felt her throat tighten. I don't know what I'm doing most days. You show up, he said. That's more than most. The baby stirred, gave a soft whimper. Rachel stood and rocked her gently, and Silas reached to brush a speck of dust from the child's brow. His hand lingered a breath longer than needed. "She looks like you," he said. Rachel nodded. "Sometimes I think she knows more than I do." Silas stepped back, ran a hand along the frame of the shed. "I've been fixing up the lean to behind the house. Figured it might serve as a room of your own, if you wanted it." Rachel looked down at Sadie, then back at him. "You don't think I'd be in the way? I think you're already part of the place. Just needs making official." Her breath caught. "And you?" "I'll wait," he said. "For as long as it takes." That evening, she set her sewing beside the hearth and walked out to the porch where Silas sat sharpening a drawknife. The stars were just beginning to show above the tree line, and the moon was thin, like a promise not yet made full. Rachel sat beside him, close enough for their shoulders to touch. She didn't speak, didn't need to. After a long while, she reached out and took his hand, threading her fingers between his. Silas didn't look at her. He just rested their joined hands on his knee and held them there, steady as a foundation stone. Inside, Sadie slept with one hand curled near her cheek. Outside, the wind moved through the grass, and neither of them let go. The first frost came quiet, just a silvering over the ground at dawn, fine as lace. Rachel stepped out with Sadie bundled against her chest and stood on the porch watching the breath rise from the horses in the corral. The air bit sharp through her shawl, but it woke her in a clean way. She pressed her lips to Sadie's temple, then settled onto the bench beside the door. Silas came up from the barn, gloves tucked in his belt, boots tracked with straw. He paused when he saw them there and gave a slow nod before stepping onto the porch. "You ready for the drive?" Rachel nodded. "Ruth's keeping watch on the baby. I told her I'd only be an hour." Silas shifted his weight. "You don't have to go out with the herd." "I want to." She glanced up at him. "I've watched the work. I need to feel it now." He didn't argue. Then saddles ready. The mare waited at the gate, reins looped over the post. Rachel approached and ran a hand down its neck. She mounted clumsily the first time, then steadied herself and found her seat. Silas led his own horse alongside, and together they rode out toward the east pasture where the cattle had been moved 2 days earlier. The grass was brittle underfoot, dotted with frost-stiff thistle. Silas pointed toward a low ridge. "Some of them tend to wander past that line. We'll keep him tight." Rachel rode ahead, eyes scanning the dark shapes scattered across the slope. She'd never moved cattle before, but she knew how to watch. She'd watched the sky for storms, watched her baby for fever, watched the trail for signs of snakes or bones or something worse. Now she watched the way they bunched, the slow shift of them as she and Silas circled wide and pressed them back together. "You pick up quick," he said, voice low beside her. "I had to." They rode another stretch in silence, the only sound the clop of hooves and the soft bellow of a calf near the edge. Rachel nudged her horse forward, circling to push it back toward the herd. Silas watched without speaking. When they reached the crest of the ridge, she pulled up. The land opened before them, dry grass rolling down to a line of cottonwoods, the river beyond that barely a shimmer under the pale sun. Rachel exhaled. "It's more than I imagined." Silas shaded his eyes. "You thinking of staying?" "I'm thinking of planting roots," she said. "But I don't know how to grow anything yet." "You don't have to know everything when you start." She turned toward him. "What did you think the first time you saw this place?" "I thought I'd rest a while, then move on." "But you didn't." "No, why?" "I saw something that didn't ask me to leave." He looked at her then. "I've been waiting to see if you'd ask me to stay." Rachel reached for the reins with one hand and let the other rest over her thigh. "I don't have much to offer." "I'm not after much," he said. "Just a place to put my hands to work and someone to share the quiet with." The horses shifted beneath them, tails swishing. Below, the cattle began to graze again, drifting in a slow, contented sprawl. Rachel looked out over the land. "I could build something here. If I had help." "You've got it." She nodded once, and they turned the horses back toward the house. That evening, Rachel stood at the stove, stirring the pot while Ruth sliced bread at the counter. The kitchen smelled of onions and salt pork. The baby slept in the cradle by the hearth, one hand curled beside her cheek. After supper, once the dishes were washed and the lamplight dimmed, Rachel stepped outside. Silas was stacking wood near the shed, sleeves rolled again, hands steady. She walked to him. "I want to wake here. Every morning." He set the last log down and straightened. Then you will. She reached for his hand without hesitation now. I want Sadie to grow up knowing what kindness looks like. What a good man is. She will. They stood there, palms warmed against each other, the night deepening around them. The moon rose over the pasture, cold and bright, and the wind slid through the cottonwoods in long, slow breaths. Rachel leaned into him, her head against his chest. I thought I lost everything out there. Silas wrapped his arm around her back. You kept enough to find the rest. And with that, they stayed no words, no need, just the quiet comfort of two people who'd walked through fire and come out with something worth holding. The wedding was quiet. No preacher, no paper announcements, no lace veils or coin rings. Just a clear sky over the Dakota plains, the smell of wood smoke from the kitchen, and Silas standing in his best shirt with his sleeves buttoned for once, a wildflower tucked into the pocket. Rachel wore a dress Ruth had helped her alter, a shade of brown that softened her eyes, and her hair was braided back, pinned in place with a piece of twine Silas had carved smooth and shaped into a clasp. Sadie sat on Ruth's lap, a ribbon tied round her wrist, clapping her hands at nothing in particular. John read from the Bible beneath the cottonwood behind the house. Birds stirred in the branches, and the air held the hush of something sacred. Rachel didn't speak until Silas took her hand, and when she did, it was only 4 words, but they came steady and sure. I will. I do. Silas didn't say anything fancy either, just looked at her with a quiet kind of awe and answered the same. Afterward, they sat around the table with stew ladled into tin bowls and cornbread still warm from the hearth. Ruth passed Sadie back into Rachel's arms, and the child curled against her mother's chest with a sigh that felt like home. Rachel leaned into Silas's side, and he rested his arm along the bench behind her, not possessive, just near. Later, when the sun dipped low and the others turned in, Rachel and Silas stayed out beneath the cottonwood. The wind had softened, and the stars came out slow, like someone lifting a blanket off the sky. I never pictured this, Rachel said, her voice barely above the rustle of leaves. Not once, not even in my best dreams. Silas shifted beside her, the bench creaking softly. I didn't either, but I knew I wanted something that didn't vanish come morning. Rachel glanced toward the house, where Sadie slept just beyond the shutters. She'll grow up with you, knowing what steadiness is. She'll grow up knowing her mother walked through fire and never once let go. He looked at her. I'll be proud to raise her beside you. Rachel turned to him fully then, and there was no tremble in her hand when she reached for his. You're not afraid of the weight I carry? He shook his head once. It's not weight when I choose it. They sat like that, palms pressed together, their foreheads nearly touching. The silence between them wasn't emptiness, it was full of all the things they didn't need to say, because they were already living them. In the weeks that followed, Rachel began tending the flock with Ruth, learning the differences between a ewe in heat and one gone lame. She mended a fence post without asking for help, stitched a new bonnet for Sadie, and once, when a storm rolled in too fast, she ran out to pull the laundry down and beat Silas to it. He only laughed and kissed her behind the barn, the rain catching them both before they made it back inside. They shared the lean-to behind the house for a month, then built a small cabin just past the orchard. It wasn't much, one room, a loft, a stove Silas hauled in from a trader in Bismarck, but it smelled of pine, and Rachel chose the spot for the window herself so she could see the sunrise without leaving the bed. Come spring, they planted potatoes and squash. Rachel learned how to cut seed eyes, and Silas taught her how to read the soil by its smell. Sadie toddled through the rows, her hands always dirty, her giggle rising like birdsong every time she fell into the soft earth. One evening, Rachel stood at the stove stirring beans while Sadie played with a wooden horse Silas had carved. The child babbled to it, dragging it through the dust with the solemn purpose only toddlers possess. Silas stepped inside, brushing straw from his shoulders. Rachel looked up from her pot and smiled, not the kind she used to force through pain, but one that came easy, the kind that belonged to a woman who knew her place in the world and had chosen it. Fence held through the wind, he said, setting down his gloves. We'll be all right come winter. Rachel set the spoon aside. I know. He crossed the floor and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. You still glad you stayed? She turned in his arms, looked up at him. I'm not staying anymore, she said. This is mine now, same as it's yours. He kissed her then, slow and sure, like it was the first time and the last time and every time in between. That night, after Sadie had fallen asleep beneath her patchwork quilt and the fire burned low, Rachel lay beside Silas, her hand resting over his heart. "I used to think a quiet life meant dull," she whispered. "And now I think it means peace." He kissed her temple, the room warm with the kind of silence that only comes from knowing you're exactly where you belong. Outside, the wind moved through the orchard, and inside their small cabin, the world turned gently with them in it whole, held, and home.